What if you could really alter the way that people interact with the healthcare system? What if you could really provide both value and a human touch if you work out the alignment of incentives? Because there are just so many players. You can often get to the answer that's going to get you to the right place. Well, if you really think about AI, one of the great things it can do is take an incredible amount of information and give you a relatively simple output, almost in the same way a physician does.
Elliott Green is CEO and co-founder of Dandelion Health AI. Experienced in healthcare, technology, and finance, Elliott has demonstrated an ability to develop and implement complex business strategy, in particular for international expansion and revenue growth.
And actually, we don't want to buy your data. What we want to do is we want to get into partnership with you because we think this is best done from within the system, not from without.
Elliott began as an emerging markets fixed income trader for a premier investment bank and evolved into a senior executive at a dynamic technology-enabled healthcare business.
Where we started was, is the benefit that you would get from this sufficient that this is worth the struggle of trying to make sure that we do this? I think the answer was a resounding yes.
Now, let's join the conversation as host Rick Lemoine speaks with Elliott Green about the idea driving the success of Dandelion Health.
Hello, and welcome to Day Zero. Today, my guest is Elliott Green, who is the CEO and co-founder of Dandelion Health. In full transparency, remember that my employer is Sharp Healthcare, and Sharp Healthcare has had a relationship with Dandelion Health for almost 2 years now. Also, any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account in this interview without the express written consent of Major League Baseball is prohibited. Elliott, welcome. Great to see you again, even if it's by electronic means. Elliott and I have broken bread together at least once. Elliott, the way we usually start this is with a brief, not too brief, review of your background, education, and usually stop before your kind of first work experience.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite, Rick. It's always nice to see you. So thank you for having me on. In terms of my history, as it were, so born in London, England. Hopefully that's obvious by this point. Was educated there, went into university, did economics and international studies. Found myself, by way of a couple of gap years and lots of time in various countries around the world, working at JP Morgan in finance, doing fixed income derivatives trading of all things. Yeah, first a long way from US healthcare.
Yeah.
And actually came to America the first time in 2007 for kind of what I occasionally refer to as what I thought was the end of the world. You know, being on a trading floor when the great financial crisis was happening. One of the most remarkable experiences I've ever had on a professional level. And then kind of left after about 3 years, went back to the UK, and then decided, I think I enjoyed my time in the US. Maybe I should go back. And my now wife agreed. And so I found myself here and was very fortunate to walk into an office of a certain Mario Schlosser, who was the CEO of Oscar Health, the insurance company just starting in New York around 2012 and 13. And so it was one of the really early members there, just an incredible experience. People jokingly say that, and this is kind of relevant for this podcast for sure, like, startups are very hard. Like, you got to be kind of crazy to do something in US healthcare. To start an insurance company in US healthcare, I mean, that's a different level. Day one, you got to have everything ready.
Yeah. I remember the startup of Oscar and how it sent shockwaves through a lot of the insurance providers in the country, and was a wake-up call actually for our organization, who Sharp has its own health plan and with a great team. But we looked at these guys and said, wow, if they make this work, we're in big trouble.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've got nothing but respect for Mario and Josh to kick that off in the first place. Just just amazing vision and appetite almost. And I think what was so exciting for us at Oscar when we began it was this idea of, well, what if you could really alter the way that people interact with the healthcare system? What if you could really provide both value and a human touch and create, the outcome benefits that we all hope are there? I think it's such a labyrinthine system that to some degree Oscar has found that, yes, it can do it in pockets, but my word, that's a tough industry to kind of revolutionize.
It certainly is. And there's a lot of inertia in terms of treasure that doesn't want to change.
Yeah. I think what I've learned in healthcare over a decade now is the funny thing is you have to follow the money more than you would like. And you start on this and you hope that you're going to be following patient outcomes and experiences. And then what you realize over time is that actually, if you work out the alignment of incentives, because there are just so many players, you can often get to the answer that's going to get you to the right place. And so I always used to, the fun game I play, and fun is probably a relative word in this context. You go out for dinner and someone you'd say, well, I work for a US insurance company. Be like, oh, they're the devil, terrible, et cetera. And then you say, well, what do you imagine the profit margin is? And I would get anywhere from 20% to 60%. The average person in the public thought these guys were just raking. And then you'd be like, it's 3%. 3%. Like, it's the same as, the broker that knocks on your door or comes to your kitchen table and sells you healthcare. It's the same profit margin. And so it's just an incredible education, really. And then after that, I was lucky enough to work at a couple of unicorn kind of startups on the Northeast Coast, Trial Spark and Clarify Health, really like life sciences and clinical trials focused, and then kind of much more enterprise data. And then I pause, Rick, because we get to the beginning of Dandelion and all in there.
Yeah. And was Dandelion your first place where you were holding the reins? And and now you're the co-founder. What's your team there now? So
there's 17 of us in total. There are 4 co-founders actually. I can give you a story of how we all came to be.
Oh, please.
Yeah. So one of the great relationships I had from Oscar was actually not within Oscar. It was a gentleman called Neam Gandhi who was kind of running Oscar and Mount Sinai, did a partnership together, and Neam was running the Sinai side of things, and myself and my boss at Oscar, Joel Clymer, running the kind of Oscar side. And we would interact, as you imagine, kind of pretty frequently. And Neam said, well, I've met this fascinating chap called Sendhil Mullainathan. He's a tenured professor at University of Chicago. He's done this and that. And he's also interested in AI and healthcare. And he's got a research partner, Ziad Obermeyer. We should probably talk to them. This is interesting. And so began this kind of slow burn. And I resigned from Clarify just before COVID. I'll never forget that, kind of late February 2020, thinking I'll kind of have a couple of months and, finish some of the deals on the table. And then, of course, COVID hits about 2 weeks later. And I think we're moving on slightly fast. And now New York shut down. And so the conversations with myself, Sendhil, Neam, and Ziad kind of accelerated. And what we really were trying to work out was the following. Why was AI in healthcare just so non-existent? It seemed this incredible opportunity, the world's largest industry, basically. And then one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting, certainly in the last 6 months, technology that had kind of been around. Why wasn't this being utilized more?
So what does Dandelion do, and how do you do it?
Yeah, so we are, in a nutshell, a data platform with a consortium of, as of now, 3 health systems, including Sharp, your employer. And we create a healthcare data platform that is focused on clinical AI and precision analytics. What that means is we are creating kind of what we think will be the largest, maybe even the world's largest and highest fidelity training data set of all of the clinical information that is generated within those systems. So not just electronic medical records, not just notes, not just pathology slides or electrocardiograms or, MRIs or CTs, but everything. And some people say, well, why everything? And the answer is, well, healthcare data is plentiful. I mean, it's petabytes upon petabytes of the stuff, but it's often in silos. So you can go and get electronic medical records, or you could get images, or you could get ECGs, but it's very rare that you can see kind of a longitudinal patient journey. And so why is that important? Well, if you really think about AI, one of the great things it can do is take an incredible amount of information and give you a relatively simple output. Almost in the same way a physician does, right? I mean, what do doctors do? You ingest tons and tons of information, you put it through your own kind of internal algorithms, and then you spit out a diagnosis or whatever may be relevant at that time. So why don't we use machines to do some of the calculations that are just beyond humans? And to do that, we really needed to have as much and complete and high fidelity and complete information as we possibly could.
So this notion of data as a treasure for health providers, particularly hospital organizations, now that kind of everybody is up on some kind of EMR, has been around for a while. And we hear stories about how successful people like Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic have been in terms of selling their data. I'm not certain they're all true. What's your experience and perspective on that side of things? And then, if you would, go into how you think you can commercialize this.
I think the key difference of Dandelion compared to what's come before is a lot of the consulting companies went around and told hospital systems, such as yourselves, your data is a gold mine. It's worth a fortune. You guys are going to work out how to use it. And everyone kind of went, that's great. How? And I think that was where, it was like, everyone kind of went, I'm not sure yet, but it will work itself out. And I think what Dandelion said was, we don't know what it's worth either. And actually, we don't want to buy your data. What we want to do is we want to get into partnership with you, because we think this is best done from within the system, not from without, right? So we very much felt, actually, this is a case of the value of the data is combined with the understanding and experience of the people generating it. And that context was so important. And so what we are doing that I think is different to what other people have done before, instead of saying, hey, Shark, can we buy your data? We're saying, let's partner. We're going to take your data, we're going to de-identify it and tokenize it before it leaves your environment, because privacy is a real thing. We have to be very respectful, and it is an important aspect. And then we're going to make it available within a cloud environment, but that data is not going to leave. So I'm not going to sell it. What we're going to do is lease access to it, okay? Because it's so valuable. But and Ziad often talks about this, it's a public good to some degree, right? We should be using this for innovation. We should not be, I think as a patient, if someone said, I'm going to take your data, I'm going to allow some of the smartest minds in the world to work on it and see if they can predict lung cancer earlier than they currently can, I would be like, great. That's a worthy use case. And so that's how we're really thinking of commercializing it.
What experience, what eye-openers have there been in terms of trying to get information from 3 different sources and then putting that together?
Health systems were not built to be data generating companies that would then share it, right? They were built around the patient and the physician and the practicalities of providing care, as they should have been, right? And so a lot of the architecture decisions that were made with that in mind. And it's only the last 10 or 15 years I think people have realized the value of the data, right? Not until then.
Yes.
So we jokingly call it a game of Finding Bob. And Bob is the person who owns the server where, like, the pulmonary function tests sit. You and I have had this conversation already, or where the EEGs sit, or where this,
yeah.
And why? Because no one thought, wow, that could be really insightful. And so it's a big challenge of locating it, finding the right person, trying to work out what kind of servers they're on, trying to extract it, And then sure, to your point, once it's actually in our environment, how do you take three very different care systems, right? I mean, we were incredibly deliberate about the systems we chose. Sharp in California, Sanford in the Dakotas, Texas Health in Dallas. Those represent three very different types of places, types of people, and also types of care given, right? There's a huge difference, right, to the kind of capitation and value-based care model that you guys practice compared to a lot of what Sanford and THR probably do, right? And so that wide variety was very much done on purpose, because what we're really trying to do is not just harmonize the data, but that's the challenge, but we're trying to create a data set that's scalable. That's the big thing. You need to build that data set so that the algorithms and the products that are built are for everybody. I think that's been the biggest challenge, is how do we do that? In terms of the data, I'm very lucky. I have a great colleague called Dr. Ziad Obermeyer, who you know well, who's pretty well class at doing this. And he is the one who is kind of leading the charge to make sure the data from those three systems ends up as one harmonious AI-ready data set.
Elliott, I want to ask you, I'm going to get a little technical here and throw a couple of acronyms around that I don't think you've heard of before,
Okay.
PHI and HIPAA. Tell me about your experiences with that, involving three different healthcare systems.
Yeah, I think this comes back to what we just discussed. Why is healthcare innovation, especially with data, not being more forthcoming, right? Why do you and I both get way too many emails about synthetic data than we should do, right? Because there is a technical and compliance and security fear about using this kind of data. Where we started was, is the benefit that you would get from this sufficient that this is worth the struggle of trying to make sure that we do this? I think the answer was a resounding yes. Like, the innovation that's possible is without doubt worth it. But the key thing, and this is really important, is privacy is an important issue. It's not one of those things that we look at and we think, oh, this is just something we have to tick off. It is a genuine aspect that we have to respect and be ethical around, and we are. And so what we do is we identify within the three systems, and you kind of know this a great deal, is their HIPAA came up with 18 different identifiers, and you could either get rid of them all in that safe harbor. If you do that, you kind of destroy a lot of the data value to the point where you can't get the innovation. So we have this balance of how do we get enough information out to make sure that we create the innovation, but not so much that we put people under risk, right? And so a few key things. We get at something called an expert determination, which is given by a person or a body that is seen as an expert in the field of de-identification. So the information that we take, we understand. And there's even things like, what's the cardiologist workflow look like? Like, is this a field that someone's likely to write something in or not? And, you've got to get into that level of detail to feel safe. And we've been very lucky. The three systems we work with, and, yourself very much included, everyone wants to work on that and make sure, because that's what gives us the right, once we've done that well, to then go and do the innovation, but not the other way around.
I have to bring up Chat GPT, AI, that kind of stuff. Where do you see things like the large language modules being augmented with more current data so that, you could take advantage of, an individual patient's care if you had access to the whole schmo?
Such a great question. I think, just to say, LLMs have been wonderful in so many respects, right? I think what's interesting is people haven't yet quite worked out how an LLM is going to affect healthcare. And I think the LLM world, if I were to be very basic about this, and this isn't all the uses, it's obviously involving language. So notes, whether it's physician, nurse, things like medically unlikely edits, things like, pre-auth, so many great use cases for it, but not for things like imaging or waveforms, which you and I have discussed. I've got so much potential knowledge in there that we haven't even vaguely explored. And we're not pretending it's 100% accurate, But I don't think anything is 100% accurate. And so the point is, and I think this is the big change in zeitgeist, people have realized that AI doesn't need to be perfect. It's okay if it's just better. And that's fantastic.
Can you give us an example of, without selling the farm or giving the farm away, but can you give an example for folks who are listening as to the kind of thing that they could do with Dandelion?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, which is just, it's almost to the vastness of medical discovery. I mean, the amount of data that we are stewarding, I would like to say, is so big that who are we to say where you're going to find interesting correlations, interesting insights, right? And so we're much more of the case of, come one, come all, and tell us what you're looking for. Now, maybe we'll be able to help you and refine some of your searches or help you understand, how it may interplay or what the right variables are. But I think the key fact is, you may have a perspective on healthcare that I don't have, and therefore have something that you want to, investigate. So to give you an example, someone may come in and have that experience and be like, I want to do that. IVF, someone may want to do that. Other examples that we've had, an ECG, very common in the emergency department. Someone comes in, gets a 10-second ECG, and then the physician has to make, and Ziad would say this as an emergency department physician, a call on what do I do next? Is this indigestion? Or is this, a serious cardiac condition? And he's got a paper on this. Sometimes you can't tell. And so you use the phenotyping. But wouldn't it be amazing if you had a data set that analyzed that ECG and gave you a really good understanding of, actually, this is 96% likely that the potassium levels are very high and this person is about to have a heart attack. Or, it's 93% on troponin levels. They just had a heart attack. That tremor wasn't indigestion. It was actually a mild heart attack. Quickly get them admitted. And those are the kinds of products. And so the big thing that we just did, and thank you for your help in getting this off the ground, Rick, is an ECG validation project where we're then saying, hey, not just what can you build, but why don't we help you understand if what you've built is good? Because that's the next frontier in AI.
Elliott, before we close, tell me a little bit about what you see as the kind of intended arc for Dandelion over, say, the next 5 years?
Number one thing is just, can we get this data in the hands of as many people as possible to further healthcare innovation, right? I just think we're in a golden time for that in a way that we haven't been before. And so it's really about how do we facilitate that? So that over the next 5 years is everything from how do we get more people building algorithms, some of those already in the healthcare industry, some of those who don't even exist yet. I mean, you and I have discussed what can we do at Sharp and Sanford and Texas Health in terms of getting these algorithms responsibly into care. The CMO at Sanford, very kind, wrote to me about the ECG validation project and said, this is one of the most wonderful things to happen with an EKG in 50 years. And those are the kind of emails you get as a CEO, and you're like, wow, I wish I could blow this up and put it on my wall.
Elliott, it's been a pleasure to do this, just as it's been a pleasure to get to know you and to work with you. Good luck. You've got an incredible team with you, and I look forward to your future success.
Rick, thank you so much. And thank you so much for everything up to now and in the future.